Honduras, Louisiana, 1 year ago. The church, the graveyard, the street, and the school have been photographed so often they began to resemble a stage set for the third act of a classic tragedy. For 15 days, until the last student dropped out, this newly desegregated parochial school was in a state of virtual siege. Television flashed the scene to the nation last fall. The central characters in the drama could almost be the leading players in an allegory on the ancient contest between good and evil. The pastor, a Franciscan priest, Father Chris Schneider.
Parents want to send their children and simply were afraid of economic reprisals and damage to property and also threats of physical violence.
A year ago, newspapers throughout America front-paged a 4-column picture of the protesters. Prominent in the picture was the rural political boss credited with making sure the school had no students, Leander Henry Perez.
I'm not bragging, sir, but I said we are not surrendering our schools to anybody, and that means anyone. I say the Archbishop, and I've said it before, I think he's earned the punishment of hell for selling out on his people.
Father Schneider's last student dropped out of this school almost exactly 1 year ago today. And for 349 days, these open doors of an empty schoolhouse symbolized the duel between the spiritual power of religion and the politics of race. Then, 3 weeks ago, one of the sisters at the school received a phone call.
When I answered the phone, it was a woman's voice. She asked when school would begin and in what school we would be teaching. Before she hung up, she said, "If you take those Negroes into our new white school, it will be blown to pieces with you in it."
That same night, a blast rocked the school.
CBS Reports, The Priest and the Politician, is brought to you by the Travelers Insurance Companies and by your traveler's agent or broker who offers you all types of insurance under the Traveler's umbrella.
Your Traveler's Insurance agent can cover all kinds of people for all kinds of problems. Mothers, babies, fathers, families, and the homes they live in. Your Traveler's agent helps with hospital bills and repair bills. He insures factories and the people who work there. He doesn't just help after an accident. He can call on Traveler's safety specialists to help make sure an accident doesn't happen. And through the Traveler's unique employee security service, a Traveler's man can come to your place of business and talk to each employee individually, explaining the benefits your company provides and helping him plan any extra coverage he needs. Your Traveler's agent can't get your son into college, but he can help pay his way once he's in college. He can't help your wife with the housework, but he can make sure that she'll never have to go out and find work. He can't get you a new job, but he can guarantee you an income when you retire from your present job. Removing your concerns has been the concern of Traveler's agents for nearly 100 years now. Remember, one man can plan all your insurance under the Traveler's umbrella.
Now, here is Dan Rather, Chief of CBS News Southern Bureau, New Orleans.
Good evening. In the intensive coverage of the 9-year racial crisis in the South, two elements of the overall story have gone almost unreported. One is the role of the church, where indeed it has chosen to play any role. The other is the anatomy of the rural political leader and the sources of his sometimes crucial power. In Plaquemine Parish, Louisiana, these two forces have met head-on. There, in the absence of Negro organization, where the courts and the federal government have yet to act, the church, in this instance, the Roman Catholic Church, has taken a determined stand. Father Chris Schneider is the priest on the scene, armed with whatever spiritual power his small pulpit and the backing of his church give him. Facing him in a duel of wills is Leander Perez, perhaps the most powerful old-style political boss remaining in the United States, a Southern segregationist whose grip on his people is all but absolute. In the short-term look at this story, seen through day-to-day flashes of violence, it might appear that Judge Perez is winning. This report is a long-range appraisal of the struggle as our camera watched it over the past 18 months. To understand the duel between the priest and the politician, one must first understand the politician and the rural Louisiana parish or county that bred him.
Some of my friends call me the shack bully. You know what a shack bully is?
No, I don't.
Well, a shack bully is a foreman out in the timber areas, you know, where they have these log cutting camps. And he's a guy who is the head man who has to get the work out of these fellas. Pretty difficult job, you see. But so I have to work harder than they do sometimes to get the work out of them. So they call me the shack bully.
Plaquemine Parish lies on both sides of the mile-wide Mississippi on rich, marshy soil that has over the centuries washed down the 2,350 miles of twisting river to push its delta even farther into the Gulf of Mexico. In the years when Leander Perez was growing up, one of 13 children of a sugar and rice planter, the flat prairie, the swamps and bayous of Plaquemine Parish were the source of its chief industry, the trapping of muskrats. Today, all that has changed. Oil, discovered in 1928, has altered both the parish and Perez, and neither have been the same since. The parish today, with its oil, sulfur and natural gas, its oysters and shrimp, is one of the richest counties in the nation. As the money began to roll in, Leander Perez, through shrewd manipulation in the state legislature, managed to siphon off a good deal of it for the parish.
Back in 1930, when oil was first produced in Plaquemines, I saw the potential. And I had special legislation and constitutional amendments passed which authorized not only our parish, but any other parish in the state which might take advantage of the provisions of law to assume the outstanding bonded and other indebtedness of local districts and then succeed to the revenues and resources. And we have 2 levy districts situated wholly within the parish, and those 2 districts owned quite a bit of land. And it developed that those lands were productive. As a result, the parish has secured a great deal of revenues.
To his credit, Perez used much of this revenue to reclaim thousands of acres of swampland, to build roads, a tunnel, schools, hospitals, public libraries, water purification and sewage disposal plants, levees to hold back the river, and 2 free ferries to cross it, all at no cost to the taxpayers.
We could be tax-free, but I don't think it's a good policy. I think everybody should pay some tax and be conscious of the fact that they owe an obligation to government.
Each of these improvements, of course, put hundreds of parish citizens on the public payroll, thus adding to the long list of voters indebted to Leander Perez.
Of course, there is only one Judge Perez. Let's don't kid ourselves. There is only one Judge Perez, and as I said, that man was a gift from God to us.
I think the judge is one of the finest men that I ever worked for and ever knew.
The judge, I think practically all of the people in Plaquemines consider him a prince.
I definitely think that he could be considered as one of the natural resources of the parish.
There are, of course, dissenters, mostly from outside Plaquemine Parish.
Well, to me, Judge Perez is a very egotistical sort of character. He's arrogant, generally, self-righteous, but I think most of the time completely wrong. He's anti-Negro, he's anti-labor, anti-archbishop, anti-Supreme Court, anti-federal government, anti-state government, anti-almost anything except what Judge Perez believes in. He's very pro-Judge Perez.
Everybody in that parish better play ball with Leander Perez, one way or another. They better.
because there's too many ways that he can make it very obnoxious. It is my personal opinion that Mr. Perez, over a period of years, has established a tighter dynasty and has a better setup than Mr. Khrushchev has.
The grip of that dynasty was demonstrated in 1952 when Perez delivered his overwhelmingly Democratic parish almost solidly to the Republicans.
When we supported Eisenhower in his first election, our parish of Plaquemines gave to Eisenhower the largest percentage of votes of any parish, county, or municipality in the whole country. We gave Eisenhower a 98% vote.
But George, how do you do it? Khrushchev doesn't get a 98% vote in his bailiwick.
Well, we did it. If you had heard speeches made by Adlai Stevens, especially the speech he made at the Mormon Tabernacle, and when we get the message to our people about those matters, and we convince them, they go along with us.
Once a district judge, the highest elective office Leander Perez has ever held is district attorney of Plaquemine and St. Bernard parishes. Combined population, 54,731. Yet for years, he dominated the Louisiana state legislature. He is supposed to have written much of its constitution, was a political colleague of Huey Long. He still likes to pose beneath Long's statue.
I represented him, by the way, in his impeachment proceedings and helped save him from impeachment. And I know the tactics used by some of his opponents in that situation. I didn't approve of everything that Huey did politically. I did support him. And as a result, incurred the enmity of certain people here in New Orleans, you know, some of the theoretical do-gooders in some of the newspapers as well.
Though he has never been elected to it, Judge Perez has been faithful in his attendance at sessions of the Louisiana legislature. The New Orleans Item once called him its third house.
I've devoted more time to the legislature than any non-member of the legislature over the years. I have not missed a regular session of the legislature in the last 50 years. That's quite a record. But as a result, I've had a lot of beneficial legislation, constitutional amendments which I sponsored that were adopted for the general good of the public and the particular advantage of our parish. Well, hello, everybody. How you feeling, kid?
Judge, fine.
Huh?
You working with those people? I thought you were a friend of mine, Judge.
Hey, Chester.
Working.
Sure.
Working
How
for
do you
TV
do? How do you
people.
do? Hi, August. By the way, can you get out our legislative program? I want to check it with you, Del. There was some confusion about that one bill that I asked you not to take up with the committee at the time. On the joint services, yes. I don't know, but the joint services thing, you know. Oh, Judge, how do you do?
I want to get behind Joe Chazet here.
Oh, 100%. Oh, we're going all out for him. Sure.
I got those two bills out of committee yesterday.
Which?
The piggyback police jury bill.
Oh, did you get the letter? Emergency?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
It was read in the clerk already.
Fine. Now then, is there a provision in the bill declaring an emergency legislation? I don't recall that.
No, sir.
Well, then we can put it in by floor amendment, possibly.
I imagine so.
Here, the judge and House Majority Leader Pappy Trish of Ascension Parish discuss a pet piece of legislation.
I don't know how in the hell they let Jackson's office write the bill instead of the one we were working on. And they introduced the one Jackson's office wrote. We don't know anything about it.
I'll get together with you.
But what we want to do is the one that we worked on. And I have our bond attorney here today to check over that provision. You know, we'll be checking on it. We're going to have a good bill, not a half-baked, half-hearted thing like Jackson's working on.
And the judge is thanked for one of his many good deeds.
Let's see, this says repeals.
Wait,
Oh.
I just want to shake your hand and thank you. I found out you took care of the problem.
Well, you put me in the hot seat, didn't you? You said sit at the head of the table.
I'm the one.
How did you find out?
I'm the one playing that party for this game.
Well, I'm glad I was able to help you out there.
And here I go invite you to supper. And you think
Well, I enjoyed it.
I want to tell you, these men are... Thank you a lot.
All right, good.
Rejecting the findings of modern anthropologists, the judge quotes his own favorite.
I know there's one of the old Encyclopedia Britannica held an article on that by a British scientist who says that the Negro child will develop until he gets to be about 11 years of age, and then because of the thickness of his cranium and the limited size of the brain area, he stops expanding. He goes so far and no further.
That's a pretty good. This friend of mine wrote that freehand.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got it.
So long. Politics, of course, is a science of fooling the people and getting by. I can work through certain of the leaders and men who are effective in the legislature, and I hardly ever lobby any member of the legislature in support of any bill, and I just sell the bill on their merits. I just hate politics, and I say that politics is a curse of the country. I believe in government, I believe in the public business, but I despise politics because politics will bring about the destruction of our country. Politicians will reach out for any influences to get them votes for their own self-aggrandizement, regardless of the public welfare.
To Judge Perez, there is no such thing as a loyal opposition in Plaquemine Parish.
Oh, there's a little group that are all, we call them soreheads. There's a little group who are disappointed because they've tried to get on the political payroll, and we wouldn't hire them as deadheads. There's just a half a dozen or so of those. And they can always stir up a little opposition, you know.
Opposition candidates often have problems even qualifying to run for office in Plaquemine Parish. A New Orleans lawyer, Sam Monk Zeldin, fought one such case.
On this specific occasion in question, I recall that the matter was tried in the parish courthouse at Pointe-a-Hache, Louisiana, in Plaquemine. And to the best of my recollection, I believe there was 11 members of the committee. This committee hears the issues and the matters brought before it as to the question of whether a person is properly qualified and so forth and so on. And at the time of the hearing, when we walked into court, there was only 2 members of the committee present, Mr. Perez and somebody else, and Mr. Perez had, I believe, 9 proxies. We went forward with the hearing, which lasted, well, I would say 3 days. I'm not certain about the time. The counsel that was appointed to represent our opposition was advised by Mr. Perez to sit down, that he wasn't doing too well, that he, Mr. Perez, would take over. So a very peculiar legal situation arose at several stages during the hearings, in which Mr. Perez was the parish committee. He also was the counsel for the other side, and then he was a witness at the same time.
Judge Perez defends such practices.
I have always followed a policy of never helping my political opponents or political enemies. And if they didn't come right under the law, I would take advantage of the law. I've always done that. So they made it difficult on themselves by not qualifying properly, and we took advantage of their errors.
He calls himself the shack bully. This is his shack. The amount and the sources of Judge Perez's personal wealth are obscure.
Well, I've learned a philosophy of living. I say I live on $1.50 a day, and I can make that any time, so I'm not worried about money.
$1.50 a day wouldn't take care of your cigars, would it?
Well, you see, I smoke a given number of cigars, usually as many as are given to me.
2 years ago, an ad appeared in local papers when FBI agents were investigating alleged discrimination against Negro voters. Citizens were advised, answer no questions. Tell them they are not welcome.
Yes, we put an advertisement in the newspaper. We put it on the radio as well. When you say FBI, it's like the Gestapo in certain parts of Europe among the people. They are very feared secret police, and that is developing more and more in this country. Of course, we advised our people that their registration and their right to vote was none of the business of any FBI or any other federal agent, and that's correct.
In 1956, Archbishop Joseph F. Rummel, in a pastoral letter, declared that segregation was sinful. Later, he announced that the parochial schools of the New Orleans Archdiocese would be desegregated. The final order came in 1962. Leander Perez, himself a Catholic, reacted with public attacks on the Archbishop and his order.
The men who led our Catholic Church and who had our respect before have lost the right to all decency and respect of their fellow men. That is how low a person will stoop when he gets caught, when he's sold his soul. He has no decency left.
On April 16, 1962, Archbishop Rummel excommunicated Leander Perez for provoking the devoted people of this venerable archdiocese to disobedience and rebellion. The Right Reverend Monsignor Charles J. Plochet explains.
Excommunication is the most serious penalty which the Catholic Church ever invokes. In effect, it means expulsion from the communion of the faithful. It means that the one who is excommunicated does not participate in the prayers or the blessings of the Church and is not admitted to the sacraments of the Church.
You must remember that the darkest pages in the history of government was when certain parts of Europe were governed by bishops. You might remember that Joan of Arc was convicted of heresy and burned at the stake at the order of his bishop. And later on, years following, she was canonized as a saint. Those bishops made a horrible mistake, didn't they?
I don't believe I have been excommunicated. I think it's a monumental fraud and a bluff to try and intimidate other people.
Leander Perez, the politician, absolute political boss of Plaquemine Parish. His confrontation with the priest, immediately after this message.
A grasshopper captured from the grass. Kid stuff. A horn to tooth that's made of brass. Kid stuff. Cowboy boots and a gun that shoots. Kid stuff. And this, the Traveler's Umbrella of Insurance Protection. This, too, is kid stuff. Because when your child is under the Traveler's Umbrella, you know that if anything happens to you, nothing will happen to him. He'll still eat well, be clothed well, live well. He'll still have a chance to go to college. He'll grow up in the house that he loves, with a mother who won't have to work to make ends meet. You can guarantee all these things with Traveler's Life Insurance. You can also get insurance for your house and car and health and business from your Traveler's agent or broker, and pay for it all with just one monthly check. Wherever you live, in the United States or Canada, there's a Traveler's man nearby. Call him today. You'll find it's mighty convenient to let one man plan all your insurance under the Traveler's umbrella.
CBS reports, The Priest and the Politician. Here again is Dan Rather.
Plaquemine Parish is equally divided between Catholics and Protestants. 29% of the people are Negroes. Last month, stories datelined Plaquemine, Louisiana, reported Negro demonstrations and mass arrests. The city of Plaquemine lies 100 miles north of Perez and Plaquemine Parish, where no such demonstrations have occurred. In Plaquemine Parish, there is no NAACP, no Urban League. There is no Medgar Evers, no Martin Luther King. And so the role of opposition to Leander Perez, so long uncast, fell at last to a Franciscan priest, Father Chris Schneider.
14 years ago, the school number one, the present school number one for mulattoes was opened. This was the first Catholic school on the Delta. There was no public school for the mulattoes as such. They could not attend the white school and would not themselves go to the colored school. And therefore, to give them some kind of education, we opened up our Catholic school for them. And then 8 years ago, we built the present new school, and that was known as School Number 2 for the whites up until the directive to open our doors to all Catholic children.
Quick to respond to that directive were a successful Negro contractor and his wife, who registered 2 of their children in the school. Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Prout.
Well, I first heard of it, that they was going to integrate the parochial school. And, well, we decided we'd send our kids to try to get them a Catholic education. And that's the reason I send my kids to school, not trying to get above myself or anything else. I was just wanted a better education for my children. That's all. As I came up, I didn't have any school, and not during the time when I was raised. We had 3 months school, and we'd go to school just a half a day. And then many days we didn't have any out of the 3 months.
We thought it was better for them to go to Catholic school and that they learned more at Catholic school. And by me not having no education when we were going to school, I thought I would just try to get my children some kind of education, because I wasn't able to send them to no boarding school to get no Catholic education.
Even before the school opened, word leaked out that Marcus Prout had entered 2 of his children.
The man that I was working along with called me up. Well, I called him, and he said, what you doing today? I said, I ain't doing anything. So he said, come up, I want to talk with you. So I went where he was working. He was working in his yard, had a bunch of men. Well, the man didn't tell me anything in front of the other men, so he called me to the side. And we sat down. He says, Marcus, he says, I don't know what you did, but he says, Judge Perez told me I have to get rid of you or he'll get rid of me. He says, and Marcus, I have to stick with the people with the money. And when he told me that, well, then I knew then there was no way out for me, that my work was just done with in the parish.
The Monday night before school opened, there was a mass meeting held at the Bureau's auditorium. And that Monday, they had men on the highway giving this leaflet to all the automobiles who passed, so that they would be sure to know about the meeting. Also, as they usually do, they'd have this flyer in the paper. They'd put it in the paper so that every home would have it.
At that and other meetings, Leander Perez described parochial school desegregation as the payoff of a conspiracy and bribe involving communists, the Jews, the president, and the Catholic hierarchy.
But $3 million grant to the hierarchy in New Orleans, supposedly to build an apartment house for old folks. Well, now that Mr. Catholic President Kennedy has set the example of paying off $3 million to the Catholic hierarchy here, what's he going to do when the pressure is put on him by the Protestant Christian leaders, such as this Bishop Oxnam, a fellow traveler in Atlanta? That takes us back just 1962 years ago, when a Judas took 30 pieces of silver. But the price has gone up, my friends. $3 million is the first installment. But regardless of the price, there's no such thing as the price is right on the heads of our fine little girls and boys. Out of 34 parochial schools, if you will check, you see that 16 of them had only 1 or 2 burrheads. There were 4 others that had 3 or 4 little pickaninnies. There's just barely 100 in the 24 integrated schools. But that's only the foot in the door policy, because they will pour into those schools in the proportion that the white people lose their nerve and lose their courage and abandon their children to a life of immorality and indecency with these filthy little Negroes who don't know what legitimacy means in the first place. Can you imagine the future of America with all the white children being driven out of our public schools in the end, and that's what is going to happen gradually? What is the future of our country? Why the communist conspiracy to deprive our white youth of educational opportunities? Does Mr. Kennedy see that, or does he give a damn? Did President Eisenhower see it, surrounded by his Zionist advisors, Mike Rabinowitz, Goldfein and company? Did Harry Truman see it? No. I don't suppose Franklin Roosevelt gave a darn either. I was nauseated, sick of the stomach when I saw the performance by the mayor and the chief of police and the fire chief in New Orleans saying, "We're ready. We're going to use the force of the police against these good people when they come out to protest against their parochial school properties being stolen and taken away from them and their children dispossessed." But you're not going to get that kind of reception here, my friends, in Plaquemine Parish. Here.
The day before school opened, Father Schneider went out to gas up the school buses.
So I went out to the churchyard where we keep the buses during the summer months and took the old bus first and started out the driveway, and it didn't take long to find out that I had no brakes on that bus. Both of the buses had been gone over during the summer, and the new bus just 2 or 3 weeks before had made a rather lengthy trip. I believe it was to Covington. I took that one next to gas it up, and the same thing happened. I had no brakes on that bus either.
We found that the master cylinders on both school buses was drained of all the brake fluid.
That night, the Prouts received a phone call.
They called before that morning. They called around 3 o'clock that morning. They started calling. And the first call, they said that they heard that we were sending our children to the integrated school, and that if we would send our children, they was going to burn us out and every other nigger in Boothville. That's the way they said it.
They had took everything I had there, so there ain't nothing much more could happen. So I just sent them to school anyway then.
At the school, the first act of an outdoor drama was about to begin. Folding chairs were unloaded and arranged in neat rows. Umbrellas were set up to shield the audience from a blistering sun that would soon heat the humid Gulf air to 100 degrees. Ice water and paper cups were also provided by the management, the county government of Plaquemine Parish, headed by its president, Leander Perez. An air of carnival pervaded the scene long before the children assembled at the church.
We could see from our rectory, and as we went over to church, that there was already a large crowd gathered over in front of school number 2. No doubt to see if there would be any colored children going to school. Actually, 5 showed up. Father Adrian, one of the assistants, had the Mass that morning, and I helped with the children to see that they went into church orderly and so forth. Whenever we bring the children for Mass, we walk through the cemetery and over to the school. So as we went through the cemetery, we prayed the rosaries so that we would be busy ourselves, and if anybody said anything, we wouldn't answer, as there were many people gathered out in front of the school. We crossed the highway, and there were people all around, but no one blocked our entrance into the school. And we went into the school, and the children went to their respective classes. The sisters gave out the textbooks and paper and pencil and so forth. And we noticed that the crowd kept getting larger and larger. So we decided then to have a half day of school. We dismissed the children, put them on the school bus to go down to Venice at 12 noon. When we left the school, someone said, "You haven't seen the end of this." Mr. Perez was also in front of our school for a speech to the people.
Our people in Plaquemine Parish have stood the test of ravaging hurricanes. This is the waste, because this would strike at the very foundation of your homes, the protection of your children, and your right to raise your children as good, moral American citizens.
That night, Marcus Prout received a phone call from Sheriff Chester Wooten.
So Mr. Wooten got on the line. He said to me, he says, Marcus, he says, I've been a friend to you and a friend to the family. He says, this is not an order. This is just only a request. Take the children out of school till I can get this thing under control, because it's about out of hand and something dreadful might happen. So I called Mr. Haydale in New Orleans and I asked him about a job. So he told me, he said, come on up, he says, and we'll see what we can do. So the morning I left to come up to go to work, I took my family with me.
Well, I can tell you that the 5 Negroes that they got to sign up at the parochial school in Buras all summer didn't want to go to that school. And some of our friends simply went to them and said, did you ask to go to that school? Is that what you wanted to do, put your children in that white school? You know that you didn't put up any money to help build that school. Isn't that right? Yes, that's right. And they took them out.
The next day, crowds were at the school again. No Negro children appeared. With the closing of school that day, the hours of terror began. A mechanic for a large company in the parish, Harold Mitchell, kept 2 of his children in the school.
At 2 o'clock in the morning, I received a call from a representative of my company wanting to talk to me at the office. And I told him at the present time that I couldn't leave my home. And if they wanted to talk with me, that he'd have to come to my house. And which they did about 2:30 in the morning. They came to my house and they explained to me why they were there, and that they had had a call from top brass of my company that asking them to talk with me and see if I wouldn't step out of this school situation, that the pressure had been put on the company with the threat of closing the company down if I didn't get out of this school situation. And closing down of the company would have put roughly 500 men out of work. Well, there's only one man in the parish with that kind of power. No one else has anywhere near the power to do that. There's only one man it could have been, and that's Leander Perez.
Told he had been blamed for such threats, Judge Perez had an answer.
Well, you know damn well that isn't true. And if they receive threats, it might be expected in the ordinary course of human events because people resented them sending their children to a school that was integrated against the general wishes of the public and those who had supported and paid for the parochial school. But I doubt if there's any serious threats made.
I decided the best thing that I could do would be to leave the parish and to get my family out of the parish for their safety, which I did this same night.
This one family with children in our school reported to me that the sisters and priests would be tarred and feathered the next morning. The next morning, from when I went over to school, the front walk all the way up to the school doors was littered with feathers as if someone had cut apart several mattresses. Oh, Father Malachi and myself stood right in the middle of the feathers, and I called the press over on the church grounds and asked to see their credentials, and then I made the statement that there will be no school today because of numerous threats of physical violence and fear of insufficient police protection.
Parish police maintained that such fears were groundless, that sufficient protection existed around the school at all times. The Labor Day weekend of 1962 followed, providing 3 days of calm. Then it all began again. This time, some of the people in the crowd wanted to talk.
Well, I have a little girl that went to Catholic school for 4 years. And this year, since they integrated it, I put her in the public school. And I'm like everybody else over here. I hate to see that happen because I don't want my children to go with the Negroes.
I have about 20 colored people working for me on my boats, and not one of them has a child in the school. And they told me that they did not want to go to school, they were just forced into it. And the priest here will go all out for the colored people. He carries those colored people to and from school. Their school, they pay $3 a month for their children to school, and we pay $5. They pay $1 for registration, and we pay $2. Now why, I don't know. I was coming from Venice one day, and there was a colored man standing on the road and a white woman walking. The priest passed that white woman up, and he stopped and picked up that colored man. Everywhere you see these priests, they have colored people in their cars with them.
Leander Perez was there again.
We, your parish officials, are not only backing you up, we're right out in front with you.
But Leander Perez was not backing up these women, mothers with children in the school.
I'm concerned about my child's education, not who she's in school with, but what she is there for. That's what I believe in. And I think if we are a Catholic, we should stand up and act like one and live like one. That's what I think.
My children don't think anything at all of it. They know what's right. I have taught them since they were born. I tried to teach them right from wrong, and they know what's right. And my little teenage daughter told me just yesterday, Mama, can't those children see, those people see they're doing wrong?
I know of many mothers are at home crying their hearts out because their children aren't here, because they are afraid to send them, because of losing their jobs.
Where does your courage come from?
My Catholic faith. That's where my courage comes from, and I know I'm right, and I'm going to continue to do what I think is right.
The families with children in the school tried to ask other families who they knew had registered to please send their children, feeling that if enough sent their children, that we could keep our school open, and they could send their children, and in union there is strength. That's the way they felt. But every time a few more would come, the next day it would drop again. So as a result, after 2 weeks of that, and the number going down to about 6 or 7, the parents themselves saw that it was useless, and no one showed up after that. Since that time, we have opened up school each day of the school year to show that our school was open to all Catholic children, even though no children came. I have asked myself, why did this happen? What could I have done, or what should I have done to avoid a situation which is unpleasant for all? It's unfair to call it a boycott on the part of Catholic parents. The only reason the parents did not send their children or continue to send them was because of fear. We would open the school doors and stay there for 30 minutes to an hour. As soon as we would leave, someone would close the doors. One morning, the doors were chained shut and padlocked so that our janitor had to cut the chain with a hacksaw in order to get in our own school.
As the time neared for the reopening of the parochial school in Buras this fall, we asked Father Schneider about the atmosphere in the parish.
I think that the people are certainly uneasy in our parish down there right now. The priest almost senses that they're even afraid to talk to us anymore or to wave to us because something might happen if they get too friendly with a priest. Even in going to church at hours other than regular church services, some people are afraid to come to church to make a visit or a holy hour because something might happen. That's the way they put it.
Something did happen. The story of the violence of recent weeks and the bombing of the school after this message.
There is no substitute for the total protection of Prestone antifreeze. Protection against freeze-up, against rust. Prestone antifreeze with its exclusive magnetic film resurfaces the cooling system with an inner shield that protects against rust and corrosion. Don't accept a substitute for the world's most tested, most trusted brand. Get total protection. Protection against freeze-up, protection against rust with Prestone Antifreeze.
CBS reports The Priest and the Politician. Here again is CBS News correspondent Dan Rather.
On Monday afternoon, August 26th, 3 weeks ago, Sister Ann Bernadette received a telephone call.
When I answered the phone, it was a woman's voice. She asked when school would begin and in what school we would be teaching. Before she hung up, she said, "If you take those Negroes into our new white school, it will be blown to pieces with you in it."
That night, a man or men climbed a willow tree to the roof of the schoolhouse carrying 3 5-gallon cans of gasoline. A fuse was made from 40 feet of string. Most of the gasoline was poured down this vent to a heater in the classroom below. More gasoline was poured along the line of the string, and finally, just before midnight, the fuse was lit. After the explosion, Father Schneider told us about the damage.
We found the room still full of smoke, and it was apparent that a pretty good deal of damage had been done. Both walls were blown out, the one on the upper side more severely than the one on the low side of the building. The ceiling of the room was completely charred, and the blocks, top blocks, the wall leading to the adjoining classroom were blown out.
The day after the explosion, Archbishop John P. Cody of the New Orleans Archdiocese expressed his indignation.
To protect the lives of our sisters, priests, and the children of Our Lady of Good Harbor Parish, I can do nothing else but order the immediate closing of Our Lady of Good Harbor Parochial School Number 2, which was scheduled to reopen on September the 3rd. I do this with the greatest reluctance. I sincerely trust that the destruction of property in this instance will bring the people of Buras together to oppose the hateful influences that have long hampered the work of Holy Mother Church in this area.
Judge, you acknowledge you are the genuine leader of these people in this parish. Let's suppose that the people who were responsible for, say, the explosion at the school turned out to be influenced by you and what you have said about the school. How would you feel about that?
Now look, you are not going to pin any responsibility directly or indirectly upon me for any overt act which is improper. I do not decry the activities of our people in resisting and in objecting in any way they can to the unlawful, unchristian, unmoral actions of the hierarchy of their local priest, to deprive them of their property, to deprive their children of the private Christian education which they had planned and for which they paid.
Now, you don't condone violence such as the explosion, do you?
Now let me say, you're not going to have me to say that I am against violence if it is a matter of self-defense. I am not going to surrender, and I don't want to see our people surrender to the communist conspiracy. Violence in certain cases is absolutely justified under the law. And I will not say that I'm against violence as a matter of self-defense. I personally would use violence as a matter of self-defense.
If the parochial school in Buras is reopened on an integrated basis, would you recommend that the people do the same as they did before?
I don't have to recommend. I know that the people will resist it. And will resist it to the utmost with whatever may be necessary to prevent the Archbishop from stealing their school and turning it over to the Negroes.
Now, Judge, this is going to be a long question, and it may be our last. You now have as your enemies, your opponents, at least the last 4 presidents of the United States: President Kennedy, President Eisenhower, President Truman, President Roosevelt, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Earl Warren, other justices of the Supreme Court, the late Pope John, Cardinal Cushing of Boston, a man that some people consider in the forefront of a fight against communism, the last 2 attorneys general, a number of governors of this state of Louisiana, You also have, as your enemies, your sworn opponents, such institutions as the United States government, parts at least of the Roman Catholic Church, the National Council of Churches, the Departments of Justice, Interior, to some extent the Department of Defense, the United States Navy, the United Nations. This is a formidable list. Many of these people and many of these institutions are considered among the most popular, the most respected of our time and our era. Now, where does all of this end? Can you win?
Well, if that question is correct, then I must be completely annihilated and liquidated. I don't concede it, however.
Well, isn't the tide of history running against you?
I cannot subscribe to the principle of surrender and the brainwashed technique of saying, it's bound to happen, so what? Let's lie down and die. Let them kick our teeth out. Let the American people forget that they are men. Let them forget our proud tradition of standing up for America. It's bound to happen, so what? Let it happen. And then let the American people be reduced to the condition of degraded slaves to a foreign ideology. I can't subscribe to that. And I don't believe I'm as lonesome as your question would imply. I'm not alone.
Mr. Perez, I understand, through the years has had a lot of power, but I think about all the power he's got left now is to stand in front of one little parochial school and shake his fist and declare that it won't be opened.
We asked Father Schneider if the school would ever be reopened.
Definitely this school will be reopened. It's just a matter of when we will reopen.
The power of the federal government is not involved here, nor are states' rights. Simply put, the issue is whether the clergymen charged with the leadership of Our Lady of Good Harbor School will be permitted to run their school as they see fit. In the running conflict between segregationists and integrationists, there are sharp differences and room for opposing points of view. But the struggle between Judge Perez and his kind and Father Schneider and his kind is something more than that. A contest between good and evil, we called it at the start of this report, and neither side is likely to deny it. Each denounces the other as evil. Each sees himself on God's side. The political power and glory of Leander Perez has been challenged by a different kind of power and glory, and the final outcome is likely to be felt far beyond the bayous of Plaquemine Parish.
God wanted this for some reason, and I think it's apparent that this is a blessing in disguise for our parish. That even though right now it's hard or difficult, and we are suffering and would like to have it otherwise, yet good people are becoming better people because of this. I believe that when a better day dawns materially and there's no longer the atmosphere that we have to work in at present, when that is no longer around, people will say thanks to God for giving them this chance to show their true color in the sense of being loyal to their faith and to Holy Mother the Church, and for being a part of the crucifixion themselves in adding to our Lord's suffering for those who are not yet actually saved.
The explosion at Our Lady of Good Harbor School was not the first to rock the South, nor is it the most recent. Here in Birmingham, Alabama, where we are taping an epilogue to this report, this Negro church was bombed 3 days ago. 4 children were killed. Nor is there even any assurance that this will be the last in the long series of acts of terror that have plagued the South over the past 9 years. But the real question is not who threw the sticks of dynamite that killed 4 children here, or who pulled the trigger on the gun that killed Medgar Evers, or who lit the gasoline-soaked fuse that blasted the school at Plaquemine Parish. The real question is who lit the fires of hate in the men who performed those acts of destruction and death. A final footnote. Archbishop John P. Cote of New Orleans announced today
that Our Lady of Good Harbor School will be reopened for all Catholic children the week beginning October 14th. Children's Mass will begin at 8 a.m., classes at 8:30. School buses will be available for all registered children. The story of the priest and the politician goes on.